images are haunting. The crash of American Airlines Flight 1420 and its aftermath.
I thought we were dead. I mean, I was holding my girl's hands and thought that was it.
Stephanie Moen is one of 134 people who survived the ill-fated flight, along with her two young daughters, Emily and Lauren. She recalls before the plane ever even left Dallas, bound for Little Rock, she felt in her gut something was terribly wrong.
I got on there, I got them buckled, and I sat down. I didn't feel right. I just felt like something was wrong, and I prayed for God to watch over us, which I never did, because I wasn't afraid to fly before. But for some reason that day, I felt like something wasn't right.
The three of them were on board row 21, proof here from their boarding passes, now partially burnt. The captain, Richard Bushman, attempted landing during a powerful thunderstorm, but overshot the runway. The NTSB found the plane's spoilers were never deployed.
We started going down, got onto the runway, and I thought, okay, we've touched down, and then we weren't stopping, and I could tell we were sliding. It was just a loud crashing, crunching. You could hear the metal and the rocks hitting, and I just knew that was it.
The jet hit a rock embankment, crashed into a light structure, split in half, and caught on fire.
All you heard is this. Sorry. It was just like a eerie silence for a minute, and then all of a sudden it was like you woke up into this nightmare of a movie. People screaming, crying, running out, you know. And I was carrying Emily and holding Lauren's hand, and there's a gentleman in the aisle on the ground begging me not to step on him. And that's when some gentlemen came back and they helped carry Lauren out. So they passed Lauren out through the window.
Stephanie and Emily slid down the wing into a swamp filled with jet fuel. Her girls remained unharmed, but Stephanie was left with a lacerated liver, back and knee injuries, and chemical burns on her legs. She was also saddled with something else that night.
It definitely was PTSD. Planes were something I didn't even want to approach. It wasn't even a consideration for me. So it was either drive or we weren't going.
Stephanie developed what is called aerophobia, an intense fear of flying. She hasn't been on a plane in 20 years.
How are you feeling?
Just nervous.
Until now. 20 years, she says, is long enough to be held captive by fear.
It was never an option to get on that plane.
This day, she is on board a Beechjet 400 for the very first time.
I was lucky enough to walk off once.
But can Stephanie Moen do it?
You ready?
20 years to gather the courage to climb on board a jet, buckle in, and take flight. She is admittedly terrified.
A lot of emotion, a lot of what had happened that night, a lot of being restricted for 20 years.
The last time she was on a plane, it was Flight 1420. The MD-82 crashed and caught fire.
From the time of the crash to the time that we got out, you know, it was in that window of 7 minutes before it all caught on fire. Luckily, we got out.
Moen hasn't been on or near a plane since. But a few months ago, something happened. Her father in Arizona died. It crushed her that she didn't have the strength to get on a plane and get to him before he passed. Now, as the 20th year comes and goes since Flight 1420 crashed, she says it's time.
I just knew once that happened with my dad, I had to change something.
Moen asked us to accompany her, she says, thinking it would hold her accountable. In other words, she couldn't back out. And so with the help of a local businessman who owns this private jet, pilots Bobby Gillum and Drew Williams, and a friend along for her support, Moen decides she's ready to try.
The idea that it's been 20 years is crazy. I don't want that restriction and that weighting me down anymore.
Moen is visibly upset when we begin to taxi before takeoff. Pilot waits for her okay.
You ready?
And she gives it. Moen sharing with me, it felt as though she was doing something wrong.
Very scary. That's when I kind of broke down a little bit.
But in that moment, she says, 20 years of fear dissipates.
I feel relieved, like a weight's been lifted off of me. So it feels really good.
After a quick flight to Fayetteville, time to land, and again, panic sets in.
It also took me back to that night. But at the same time, it was freeing. It was like letting it go.
We take a short break and then fly back to Little Rock. And on that second flight, little emotion, less fright. Moen facing down her fear.
Knowing that I had people here and they were doing it for me and helping me with that, it definitely made me push through even more.
After the flight, an emotional thank you to the pilot for a safe landing.
Good job.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm very proud of myself for what I did. As bad as things seemed, when you get to the other side, it's not so bad.
Not so bad, she says. Years of trauma, memories of a fateful night in June near the Arkansas River, slowly fading away.
The further and further we get out from it, the more I realize, it just was something that happened. It's not something that's going to control my life, and I haven't let it control my life other than the flying aspect. But today I broke that. For them to help me with this was the most healing thing I've had. So I'm very grateful.